Hello, September Slam 40k players, and really 40k players in general if you're coming across this on my channel. I wanted to make a video talking about some of the expectations for the weekend and putting a clarification on some of the things that I've said before so that you've got active examples to know whether you're doing the right or the wrong things. The first thing, and really the biggest thing, is when I talk about being a decent human. I open every single event by saying this, and it can have different interpretations for different people. But I wanted to run through some examples to show you what is on the good side of things and what is on the wrong side of things. The first one that I want to start with, and this is something which is very, very big in tournament play, is the information that you feed to your opponent when you feed it to them. Now, 40k is a game that we play with perfect information, which means that you can't hide something from anybody, but on a technicality, if somebody doesn't ask, you don't actually have to tell them. Now, essentially what we're talking about here is letting people know what you can do, but not letting people know what you will do. And what this does is create a situation where somebody is able to make an informed decision, make decisions about tactics or scoring or whatever else, knowing what could potentially happen from your army's list of stratagems and enhancements and rules and whatever else. A perfect example is playing on the Space Wolves recently. At the start of my opponent's movement phase, I would always remind them, hey, don't forget about my reactive moves. One when you win within 9, and if you shoot at me, I can blood surge into you. Now, on that faction, I went undefeated in RTT, and I went undefeated at that GT, and so obviously me reminding my opponent of that didn't actually hamper me in any particular way. All it meant is that my opponent was then making decisions, knowing the things that I could do to them and not just being caught out and feeling like crap because I mentioned it at the start of the game and then didn't mention it again. And we've all kind of had these games where they aren't actually the most pleasant experiences, where somebody just rambles tons of information at you at the start of the game on an army that you might not be familiar with, and then doesn't remind you at all and just goes, bang, I'm spending the CP and I'm doing this. It's not the greatest experience. And in my opinion anyway, it's not the most competitive way to play 40k. And not every single ability that you've got or whatever else needs to be announced in that way. But if it's something which is so big that it can swing the game or that your opponent will be having to play around it, I think it is actually important to remind them just at some point at the start of the turn, hey, by the way, remember, this is my big gotcha. And when you start doing that and your opponent does that back for you, you notice that people then stop losing games because they just did stupid shit because they didn't know. And really, they lost because they just didn't make as good of decisions as you. It also doesn't remove, and this is the other side of it, where people can very often swing to, oh yeah, but where do we stop? Do we just tell opponents everything? No, the easy answer is it stops fucking somewhere. And excuse you. Sorry, he heard Space Wolves and he had to get involved. And so what we're finding here is a balance between, as I said at the start, you're not telling your opponent what you will do, but you are letting them know what you can do. And this is something we see at the highest level of play, where two players are actually just kind of working together to create a board state which is understood, and where players are cognizant of everything their opponent can do reactively to them. Like, for example, when I was playing at Dice Arcade, I played against a very good friend of mine, Alex, who I run tournaments with, and it was one of the most fun, competitive, sweaty, awesome games that I have played. And we were literally just reminding each other of everything we needed to do, but it didn't mean that neither of us made mistakes. Like, for example, Alex forgot to bring a unit in. We had the mission modifier for turn 1, you could bring a unit on, and we got to the end of the turn, and even though we knew about it at the start, he just missed it, and we went from there. And 40k is a game where you win from punishing opponents' mistakes. But that shouldn't be they did something which very obviously they needed to know about a major ability that you have, which can change that play. And in all of the games that I have had, my opponents making decisions around, all right, if I move there, you reactive move, but if I don't there, I don't get primary or I can't do this secondary or whatever else. That should be the perfect case of 40k decision making. And this then branches out into the concept of takebacks. Now, I always play off the rule that if I give my opponent takebacks, then I would expect them on things that I've stated intent on. Perfect example, if I'm starting my turn, I draw my cards and I go, okay, cool, I've got cleanse. That scout unit there is going to do it on the far side and this one's going to do there. But the card states you have to state it in your shooting phase to start the action. We get to the end of the turn and I just forgot to say it. My opponent, in my opinion, if I've been giving them a take back or if I've agreed to them at the start of the game, the opponent, in my opinion, should just go, oh yeah, no, you told me they were going to do cleanse. That's no problem, man. They didn't shoot, they didn't charge. That's absolutely fine. However, what I want to encourage people to do is have a conversation with your opponent before the start of the game and talk about whether you want to have takebacks. There is no gold rule for whether you do this within games, but generally I always go off whatever my opponent is expecting from me or is taking from me. That's what I expect back in return. And if there's no takebacks, absolutely no problem. I will just play everything as it lies. And so you can see what we're really talking about here is open honesty and fairness, because that is what makes games just flow. And it also stops one player from feeling like shit at the end of a game because maybe they were giving more to their opponent than their opponent was giving back. And, all of these things should be reciprocal in nature. What it does not mean is that you need to give away tactical choices to your opponent before you make them. You don't need to say, if you move over there, I'm going to overwatch you, because that is giving your opponent something that they need to make that choice without knowing whether you will or you won't before you go. It's not saying, if you move over here, I'm going to use reactive X. You just let them know, hey, if you do, I can reactive if I want to. And if there's any part of that people struggle with, feel free to come up and actually talk to me at the event. I feel like when I've got one-on-one time with people, I can do a better job of explaining it with people. And I'm more than happy to have that conversation. All of this stuff is a moving target that all of us are continually moving towards. And we won't always do it perfectly. And that's fine. But we want to make sure that we are trying to push for that. Now, the next thing I want to touch on is role discipline. First things first, you should always be picking up, outside of a very light number of examples, you should be picking up your failures, not your successes. Generally speaking, when somebody is trying to cheat or when somebody mentally maths incorrectly, nobody picks up more failures than they should. So if we're all picking up our failures, leaving our successes for our opponent to see, it just creates a state where it is one more bit of ambiguity that can be introduced to games, which is completely removed. So pick up your failures, let your opponent see it, or have them a part of the conversation. I've even had it when I've got, like, say, for example, Tau, or on Space Wolves, I've got exploding sixes or lethal hits. It might even be that my opponent's like, hey, do you want me to pull out the sixes for you? And I'm like, yeah, cool, man. And we're working together on it. Again, you're working with your opponent to make the game go smoothly so you can all finish within the 2.5 or 3 hours or whatever it is you've got for the particular tournament that you're at. The next thing is do the exact same thing with failed rolls. And that is, like, for example, if you're using a dice tray, which I always do, I will let my opponent know if a dice rolls out of the tray, failure or success, I will pick it up and I will re-roll it. And this is the same for when things are like, there are some people that are old school 40k purists that don't like using dice trays and they roll on the table in between terrain. Now, with the introduction of bases, there is more opportunity for a dice to be cocked than ever. Remember that the GW rule is that if a dice is not perfectly flat on the table, it is a cocked dice and should be re-rolled. However, a good general rule is that if you see something like that, yep, cool, the dice isn't perfectly flat, I will re-roll it, regardless of the face of it, because this has come up a couple of times where, and it doesn't mean that somebody was doing it on purpose, they might not have just been tracking it, and our own innate bias is something that we cannot discount. We want ourselves to do well, we are the hero of our own story. Humans do not do well with failure unless we are particularly trained in dealing with that sort of hardship. So when your dice is cocked, when it falls out of a dice tray, re-roll it. Don't just take it. Unless you say to your opponent, when I roll dice and falls out of the dice tray, if we can see the result and it's flat, I'll just accept it. But whatever you pick, you do that for the entire weekend. And have a conversation with your opponent pre-game, set that baseline so that they know. Sometimes you will forget in the craziness of a tournament. But the first time it comes up, pick one thing, and generally it's easier. I will always re-roll it if it falls out, because then you don't have the bias of a dice falls out of your dice tray. You've seen the result. Oh, for this game, I'm going to keep it, because you want to keep that roll. Be aware of your own biases and how that can affect your decision making. Next thing I want to touch on is around what is really acceptable for you to say and do with your opponent. And this isn't on the vein of like censorship or anything like that, but it's, when things are going wrong, when you're having dice rolls that just don't go your way, and we've all had these, your opponent just cannot roll the bad dice. Just whatever they're doing, they are having success. If that is the case, it's okay to have banter and have a bit of a joke about how things are going wrong for you and whatever else. But keep in mind, banter is only banter when both people are laughing, smiling, and having a good time. If it's banter, but you're saying something and your opponent feels like shit, you have missed the mark. If a message you send is not received in the way that you intended it, you have failed in your attempt at communication. So if, for example, you're going, oh man, these dice are so shit, like nothing's gone wrong. You just got like your army rules bullshit and your army's so good and I can't roll dice and man, you're rolling nothing but sixes and you know what I mean? And it doesn't always have to be in that particular tone or whatever else. But make sure that if you're laughing off some of your misfortune, when I'm in a game with somebody who's got a really, really strong unit or army rule or detachment or whatever else, I will generally always go to the side of, man, that rule is so cool. That is so strong. And I will engage with them about their army. And I find that in doing so, when I don't focus on it being bad or it being broken, because at the moment we are seeing a state of 40k where we really haven't seen the game this balanced before. There is a lot of armies that are very, very, very viable. And I know that there are bones to pick with Imperial Agents, new stuff that have come out in codexes. I have my own bones about Tau and some of the shortcomings that they have within their codex. But I'll reiterate with everything else that I say, it's not for you to bring that and introduce that into your game. If you're debriefing and talking after a game with your opponent, then by all means, talk about the things that you like and you don't and whatever else. But when we're at the table, we are making sure that you are not just playing a good game of 40k, but you are being an excellent opponent. And that can mean celebrating your failures or your opponent's successes with them. And that also means losing with dignity and grace and winning like a champion and not being a shithead about it. And I want to reiterate with all of this stuff, if anything comes up, even if it might seem small or incidental, you coming and getting me to intervene in something or even just listen in is not a death sentence for the other person. It's not that I'm going to come in and start swinging a hammer and you're being a narc and you're whatever else. It should be an automatic first step when there is something that comes up which is problematic that you either don't think you can solve for yourself or that you as a player shouldn't be solving, this should be for somebody else. Or you just require assistance. Come and get me. There is no over communicating, and I don't mind walking across the event hall to come and stand by a table for something that I potentially don't need to deal with. I would rather make that trip and know that I wasn't needed, but be across the situation and know what's going on. I want to know what's happening in my event hall. You are not putting me out. You are not making me do unnecessary things. Now, a few things for you players, before you come and get me with rules-related stuff or anything like that, make sure you've opened up the Warhammer 40k app or Wahapedia or whatever it is you're using. Make sure you've had an honest attempt to try and find the rule. If it's taking too long because you're not super familiar with the rules or where to find them, obviously it's TOs and massive nerds that already know where they are because they've had to search them before. We can find it a lot faster. So if something's taking too long out of your game, just come and grab us. And if there's something where you guys genuinely just can't agree, don't delve further into an argument or a disagreement. Come and grab us. This is something that I had an instance where I should have done this at CrewCon, and I hate myself for not doing it, and I really don't want you guys to make the same mistake that I did. Someone who should have known better and still got in my own head. Please come and grab. And that's everything that I wanted to touch on. That is, in a very general way, like I could talk for a long period of time about all this stuff. But this was my succinct version of, to me, what being a decent human being when you're playing 40k is about. And I want you guys, if there's anything that doesn't make sense, I don't expect you guys to know this stuff. This is something that I have engaged with and trained over the course of my life in a lot of different areas and been able to bring it very quickly to 40k because I've used it elsewhere. If you've never learned this stuff, if you're worried about going too far down a rabbit hole which disadvantages you or whatever else, don't be afraid to come and talk to me. I'm not going to judge you because you might not understand some of the nuance of something which is honestly a complicated set of human social values for us to piece together and have people do all the time, even when they might be having a bad day, bad stuff at home, and then they have something where they come to a tournament and stuff just doesn't go their way, or they have a day where it's hard to emotionally regulate or whatever else. I want to be a resource to help you guys. And so I can't do that if you don't come and talk to me. I'm more than happy to engage in conversation and help you guys wrap your head around it if you're struggling with it, and I will not judge you for not knowing something. So with that, I hope you're all really, really excited for this weekend coming. Just a reminder to everybody, we're doing something special for all of the patrons that are in the Aussie tournament tier. We are going to be doing, for anybody that is a patron, from any point since I launched that particular tier up to the end of the event, we're going to be giving away a combat patrol or a boarding patrol of your choice. The winner, I will announce it. We won't have the physical box for you at the event because obviously you've got to pick it. But you can just designate a box that we are actually able to buy. If there's any that are like old or out of stock or whatever, we won't be able to do that. So bear that in mind. But we wanted to do something special for all the people that are really helping us solidify being able to run tournaments regularly in New South Wales. And not only that, I'm going to be announcing a little bit later, we're running a TTS RTT and then later a TTS GT with all of my international audience and fans, as well as people from Australia and the New South Wales circuit and whatever else. You get the cost of that tier off any tournament tickets that you buy. So it's a great way to support me, support the channel, support the studio and all the events that we're running. And we're going to do giveaways at every single physical event that we do. This one probably being on the larger side as it's a little bit of a launch thing, but it will be value for whoever's involved in that giveaway. And if you're only able to do it for 1 month, get yourself into the Discord, and then you're not able to do it further, that's absolutely fine. We appreciate every single person that is able to show us any kind of support. It makes a massive, massive difference. And if you've got anything that you think maybe I couldn't include in this video or I missed or whatever else, obviously I can't talk forever in these. I need to keep it relatively succinct. Just put it down in the comments and I'll try and highlight it at the event, or I'll have a chat with people, or let people know who are reading the comments after watching the video about something that you think is really important for behavior. Remember, when interacting with everybody, make sure that you're respectful, make sure that you're kind. And yeah, we can spread a lot of the learnings that we've had that make this hobby so much more fantastic. Get that out onto more people and more ears. Thank you to everybody. I hope this information has helped. And as always, we really hope you're enjoying your 40K, and we'll see you on the weekend.